Hey guys, thanks for joining us here again at Salty Ginger Talk. Good to have you back. So I was walking through the airport in Denver several weeks ago, and I walked past this girl who had a sweatshirt on. It had one of the greatest quotes I've seen. Her sweatshirt said, "Your fear of looking stupid is holding you back." And it just was so brilliant in its simplicity. It struck me. I actually stopped her and said, "Hey, I love your sweatshirt. It's a great message." She just smiled and said, "Thanks. I really like it." And, it just got me thinking about how many successful people, ultra successful people, have failed miserably and not allowed it to stop them from moving forward in the world, Um, and I think it's something that we, just as people, adults, way more than children, adults really struggle with. I don't want to look stupid. I don't look bad. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to look stupid either. But like I've made a pretty good career of it actually. I've had big successes. I've had big failures too. But I'm not afraid to take my shots. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it does not work out. And sometimes when it doesn't work out, it sucks. There's no two ways about it. But I want to kind of walk through just one kind of get that on the table that you got to quit worrying about looking stupid. 100 years from now, we're all going to be dead, and no one's going to remember a goddamn thing about what we're doing or what you said or did on this day. Nobody cares about you nearly as much as you think they care about you. People are so concerned about how they look, how they're perceived. Who gives a shit? Just take your shots, live your life. You want to get better. You want to think through things. I mean, I'm not advocating just recklessly taking shots at stuff, but you can't be afraid to change your life. Like you just can't, or you're not going to be very happy as you go through it. So, with that said, we're going to kind of go through some pretty famous people and/or inventions that happened by accident, like people that failed miserably and got back up and tried again, and hit it big on the second, third, or fourth try in some instances, and some inventions that people came up with or things they discovered or created totally by accident, simply because they were taking action and they were trying to do things and they came across something that they had never tried to look for, never anticipated, but wound up being pretty life changing and things you'll recognize as we go through them. So, first one is actually Henry Ford, and everyone knows Henry Ford, the Model T, assembly line, all that good stuff. Well, a lot of people don't know Henry Ford declared bankruptcy twice before he hit it big on Ford Motor Company. So he actually started as a machinist, then he was an engineer, and he was working in his time off on cars, what turned out to be cars. But he was working on, combustion engines and perfecting how to make an automobile. And in 1896, he came up with this vehicle called the quadricycle. So he was sure he was onto something, and it turns out he was. So he quit his job and he founded a company called the Detroit Automobile Company. Um, got overtaxed, was trying to run production, trying to run the business side of the business, failed miserably at both of those, and wound up having to file bankruptcy and liquidate the company. So that was his first attempt. A couple years later, he launched a company called the Henry Ford Company. Same deal, try to make and sell cars, but the branding and marketing were poor. The American public didn't recognize what the product was, what benefit it could potentially have for them, and it went under as well. So he filed for bankruptcy again. And then his third shot was the Ford Motor Company. So after two pretty spectacular bankruptcies, he founded the Ford Motor Company, and that's the company we all know today, which is the behemoth that produces automobiles in Detroit. So, Henry Ford, failure, wild success. Uh, Walt Disney is another one. Walt Disney, who we all know from the Disney Company and Mickey Mouse and kind of the pioneer in entertainment, in animation. He actually started his first film company in 1922 in Kansas City, Missouri. I had a partner there, and they made a deal with, turned out to be a fairly unscrupulous company. They provided a bunch of service and went into debt to service his company. This company didn't pay their bill, and so they went bankrupt. He went bankrupt in 1923. He had to kind of take a couple of years to pull himself back together, move from Kansas City to Hollywood. And so 6 years later, he debuted a little character called Mickey Mouse, and the rest was history. But Walt Disney could have packed up his stuff and gone home. Said, "Forget it. I guess I'm not just going to make it because my first step in this thing failed miserably." So I thought that was interesting when I was kind of researching this for the podcast. So Milton Hershey, you've all heard of Hershey bars and the giant Hershey company in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Hell, the town's named after the guy. So he actually spent 4 years apprenticing in a candy shop, and then in 1876, he started up his own candy shop in Philadelphia. He kept it kind of going, not super successful for 5, 6 years, and then went under. He tried to open another store in New York City, and that went under as well. So he returned home, which home happened to be Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and started kind of working on production because he was a candy maker. He knew from being an apprentice in a candy store, he knew how to make candy, but he kind of worked specifically in caramels and chocolates. So he was working on the perfecting the milk chocolate. And his first actual successful company was a company called the Lancaster Caramel Company. He thought there was more kind of juice in the chocolate, so he kept working on that and sold the Lancaster Caramel Company in 1900 for $1 million and decided, I'm going to focus full time on milk chocolate. Once he got the recipe nailed down, then, the rest, like we talked about previous, is history. It's the Hershey Company now, Hershey bars, and it's got a theme park and, a multi-billion-dollar company. That guy was bankrupt. He went bankrupt the first time he tried to do it. Last one on the list of people that have, very famous people that have tried and failed, H.J. Heinz. Heinz 57, Heinz ketchup. So when he was 25, H.J. Heinz, he had two partners, and they started off actually making horseradish. So just making horseradish sauce. Heinz 57 sauce, the first variety of that, the first spice or flavor of that was actually horseradish. Wasn't nearly as big or lucrative as he hoped. And then there was a business panic in 1875, and that bankrupted his company. The panic bankrupted his company. There wasn't capital, couldn't meet his debts, and he went bankrupt. The next year, he got together with his brother and his cousin and started a new company in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And they actually organized that business around ketchup. And so, now Heinz ketchup, again, the rest is history. But there's a guy that, didn't quit, didn't give up, and things went terribly for him. Their fear of looking stupid did not hold them back. Now, look, those are crazy big goals. There's nothing wrong with wanting to dream big and be big. There's also nothing wrong if you don't want that. But don't you want you definitely, everyone wants their life to get better. Everyone wants to improve their life, be happier, improve their relationships, improve their business, improve their physical and mental health, right? There's lots of ways to do that. But if you're too afraid of looking stupid to make changes and try new things, it's not going to happen. Along those same lines, you don't know where taking those actions is going to lead you to. It could lead you down a path you never knew was a great path for you, but you'll never go down that path if you don't start taking action. So here's some inventions that were absolutely by accident. First one's a microwave oven. Scientist named Percy LeBaron Spencer was working in a lab, and he was working on magnetrons. These are high-powered vacuum tubes that generate short radio waves called microwaves. So he's working in there, and as he was doing his work, he noticed he had a chocolate bar. I don't know if it was a Hershey bar or not, but he had a chocolate bar in his pocket, and he noticed it had melted. He's like, what's melting this? And he realized, it's these magnetrons. And so he had kind of figured out what was going on and discovered it was these microwaves. And in 1945, he filed a patent for this little metal cooking box that he had invented called the microwave. So, accidental investment that literally changed the world. I can remember, I'm 52, and I can remember when we got our first microwave in the early 80s. And it was a huge deal to have a microwave in your kitchen, because before then, you had to be uber wealthy to have them. I remember when we got ours, it was like, holy cow, this is awesome. So accidental, total accidental invention. Another one, penicillin. I had strep throat about every 6 weeks for a couple of years when I was a kid, and I always was given penicillin. Well, penicillin was discovered absolutely by accident. It was discovered by Dr. Alexander Fleming. He wasn't looking for an antibiotic. He was actually just testing samples in petri dishes. And he left a staphylococcus bacteria out in a petri dish for a couple of weeks. And he came back and nothing had grown. And he couldn't figure out why. Well, it turns out that there was a mold in there called penicillin, and it was that mold that led him to understand that penicillin could be used to prevent other bacteria from growing. So, absolutely accident, penicillin, in many instances, it saves people's lives because a simple antibiotic can prevent or stop a pretty serious sickness from happening to people. So, penicillin, put it in the oops, great news category. So, super glue. Super glue was invented entirely by accident. That was in 1942. There's a gentleman named Harry Coover, and he was actually looking to help the war cause out because 1942, deep in the heart of World War II, he was looking to figure out how to build gun sites using plastic to build gun sites for the war. And instead, one of these formulations he got done with, and it was this chemical formulation, and it just stuck to everything. Like you couldn't get it off the minute the two things touched. It was, like bonded together. So, wasn't a hit right away either. He took it out, and people were like, okay, great. What do we use it for? Like, what's the practical application for this stuff? So this was in 42. 9 years later. He'd been working with friends and working with people saying, look, I think I'm really onto something here, but I don't know what it should be used for. He took it to the Eastman Kodak company, and a researcher there helped him file for a patent for alcohol catalyzed cyanacrylate adhesive compositions / superglue. The rest is history. We all know we go to that drawer in our kitchen, we pull out the superglue, we put together the vase that broke, the glass jar that we don't want our mom to see, whatever the case may be, right? And the last one that I've got for you is Velcro. So Velcro, believe it or not, was invented by a guy named George de Mestral after a walk in the woods. He goes for a walk and he comes back and he's got, little spores sticking to his pants. He's like, what? These things, like, I can't get them off. Why do they stick so well? Why do they adhere so well to my clothing? So he took it, started looking under a microscope, and he noticed that there was hooks and loops that were holding together. And that was how these spores kind of transported themselves and propagated their species. Well, he went back and said, how could we do this with other materials that we have in the world? He started experimenting, and the easiest way he found was using velvet and crocheted material, Velcro. And so that's how Velcro was invented. So again, totally by accident, by a walk in the woods. So none of these people were worried about looking stupid. None of them said, oh, I don't want to be judged. I don't want to look bad. I don't want people to make fun of me. They just took action, followed their national curiosity, or in the instance of a Henry Ford or an H.J. Heinz or a Hershey or a Walt Disney, they said, I'm not going to let this failure stop me. I know I'm onto something here. This might have gone terribly, but I'm not done yet. I'm going to pick myself up. And I'm going to go back after it. Didn't worry about looking stupid. Didn't worry about what other people were going to think about them. And they kept going until they found success. So remember that quote. Your fear of looking stupid is holding you back. Quit worrying what it looks like to other people. Take action. Go after the things you want. Learn from your mistakes. When things don't go right, learn the lesson. Apply that lesson to future actions. And it's a great recipe for success. So thanks again, guys. Appreciate you taking the time to come back and see us. Don't forget to go to our website to see all of our content, saltygingertalk.com. There's links to our other social media platforms and content on there as well. And you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter there. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day.